Lag Boimer. Happy Lag Boimer. Yeah. The other, what? Oh, okay. Lhavin b'toises beer. We're going to continue where we left off last week. To understand with added explanation. Inyan birchas Hazimun anal, the idea of the blessing of the zimun. Zimun is when we said before the invitation, the invite, that when you do the blessing after the meals, you do an invite. One person calls and says, let us bench. We learned last week you need 3 people in order to do that. And we explained last week the idea was because there is a difference when you're channeling energy to one person and when you're channeling energy to a whole city. When you're channeling to one person, you can make a little stream. Just a thin little streaming of spiritual energy flow. And then you don't have to make such a major preparation. It doesn't have to be very super deep, just to be a little groove, if you might say, in the ground, and you can get. But once you have 3 already, it's considered already the ability for many. Because once you have 3, you can already create all kinds of blends. It's considered already giving a hamshacha, a flow, to a whole community. Then what you need to do is you first, from the river source, or from the source, the river, you have to create a reservoir, a pool of water, and then from that reservoir, that's when you can take, and it can flow. And that's why when you have more than one person sitting together, so there's 3 stages. There is the makar, the source, then there is the brecha. Brecha is the pool. And then there is, from the pool, you're drawing down. We learned last week, you're drawing down from the brecha into the cup. The cup is the individual recipient who is receiving from the flow. When the person is holding the cup by benching and he's holding the wine, he's saying, let us draw down, which means when he's saying, let us draw down, first he's creating the reservoir. And then from the reservoir, he's drawing into the cup. And we learned last week, so that's the significance of why an individual doesn't have to do it, or even 2 people can't do it, because by 2 you only have 2. You don't have the ability to create more than 2. It's only when you have the teferes, then the 2 extremes can join together. And when the 2 extremes can join together, you can begin to create the multitudes and multitudes of variations, and then you'll have the brech. So then we discussed also last week why when Mashiach is going to come and there's going to be the big meal, and they're going to offer the cup of the benching to Avram Avinu, and Avram Avinu was going to decline, and he's going to say, I can't lead the benching, I can't do the invite, because Yishmael comes from me. And Yitzchak is going to say, I can't do the invite because Esav comes from me. And Yaakov is going to say, I can't do the invite because I married 2 sisters. So we're learning what's the connection. He asked the question, didn't they ever bench in their life? Suddenly they can't bench because they had this problem. So last week we discussed that what's unique, only on that cup they don't want to touch. Because that cup is talking about the wine that's still inside the grape. The grapes that are there from the 6 days of creation, which is referring to the tree of life. There is the tree of knowledge, which is a very, very potent, powerful life force, the tree of knowledge. But the tree of knowledge is a life force that's already lends itself to eventually to pollution, to be polluted and to be corrupted and to be used as an energy to flow into the realms of impurity. It has a source of flow, of godly flow, definitely. When we say Eitz Hadas, before we say, it doesn't say it's the tree of death, it's the tree of knowledge. Good, and good is said before bad, and then bad. But bad can come from it. But then there is the tree of life, and the tree of life is a much, much higher source, connected to the deepest and the highest levels of life. And the tree of knowledge, he says, of good and bad, that's where regular wine comes from. And therefore, when you drink wine, it brings out the best in a person, and it brings out the worst in a person. It has that ability to bring out both. Okay? So, if Yishmael drinks from that, meaning if some of that wine, because of its polluted state, ends up in sustaining the negative, it's bad, but it's repairable. If, God forbid, the tree of life would be accessed by those who are not meant to access that, then that would be very dangerous. And we're saying that what Avram was afraid, that since from his pipeline there has been already a leakage, there has been a leaking happening from his flow of life, from his soul. He wasn't able to contain everything in Kedusha, in holiness. Some of his energy was drained into the klipa, into the negative. Therefore, Avram is saying, regular wine I can handle, but to give me this very, very deep, powerful thing, I'm too afraid of. Because God forbid I should allow that into the wrong hands because of me, because so too Yitzchak. That was the general idea we were learning about last week. It wasn't so clear. Let's continue today, see what we can clarify as we continue learning. Lhavin b'toisvus bir. This is on page Kuf Daled in Siddur of the Alter Rebbe. Shar Birches Hamazon. Okay, I made the copies. It's the second page. Lhavin b'toisvus. It's the page after 206. Lhavin b'toisvus bir, to understand with added explanation. Inyan Birches Hazimun. The idea of the blessing of the invite Hanal that we mentioned earlier. The Inyan Maimer Hanal, and the Maimer of what the sages say b'koshel bracha, with a cup of blessings. That they're going to give it to the forefathers when Mashiach comes. When God is going to make a festive meal for the tzaddikim, can you do as it is known? Because we learned in Reya Mehemna, which is Zohar. It's good to learn that today, day of the Arizal. We studied in Zohar. The Zohar says there's 3 levels as things emerge from the hidden and the unknown, from Hashem into creation. There is Makar, there is a level called source, and then there is a level called Maayon. Maayon, it means spring. And then there is the Chafira. And then there is a dug cistern. So let's explain what that means. Makar means the water while it's still completely hidden. It's still in its source, like the subterranean water, like the water that is deep beneath the ground. That's called Makar. It's the source. We know that all water above the surface is coming from below the surface, from deep caverns or cavities that are deep under the deep in the earth, is right. But yet, it's not known. The Makar is completely hidden and inexperienceable, so to speak. Then from there comes springs. What is a spring? A spring is already water protruding out of the soil, and it's coming up. It's delicious fresh water, but it's only a tiny bit from the Makar, from the source. And then from these springs, you might have the springs making little brooklets, and eventually you create your own little pool where the water goes in and it's held. And that's called a chafira. So this is obviously, just like it is physically, this is mimicking the spiritual realms. There is a source called the Makar, the source, which is completely hidden from any whatsoever creature, being, angelic being, celestial being. It's hidden beyond, no one knows it, it's completely within God. Then there is a place what's called Maayon. Maayon is already a spring. It's from the hidden that's emerging a little bit, is coming out, like Chachma. Chachma is called a Maayon. Why? Because Chachma is already the beginning of consciousness. It's with the creative, with the unknown, where the superconscious is already emerging out into a conscious flash. And finally, the pool is where it's gathering in a vessel. And the vessel is already the Bina. The Bina is where you have the words, the containers, to be able to hold it. And then you have a full idea with words, and so that's like sort of a chafira. Makar, he says, the Zohar says, Ubchinas, I knew I'm doing something over here. I'm reading over here. And I'm noticing that I skipped the whole page. I'm like, I didn't prepare this before. I wasn't looking at this. I only looked at this page. That's right. Yeah, let's learn it for you. I was going to learn the page before this. Oh, let's go back. Abir Advarim. Something was funny. Page before, page Kuf Gimel, I'm sorry. Abir Advarim. I want to continue, but I want to go through all the pages. Yuvan, page Kuf Gimel. Opposite of page 204. I mean, by you it's copies, so it's the page after 204. Yuvam Bahagdim Inyan Anal. We're first going to preface what we learned earlier, B'yayin HaMeshumar Ba'anovav, to get a better understanding of the wine that's inside the grape. Tehine, before we see, remember last week we spoke that there is a dangerous wine and there is a healthy wine. The dangerous wine is the ordinary wine that's what Chava took. Chava squeezed the wine out of the grapes. And she put it out. The other, and that's called Eitz Hadas, the tree of knowledge. But then there is the wine while it's still in its grape, and that we said is, beyond this mixture of good and bad. So what is the idea? So he says, this is my assumption of what he's saying, this is what I think he's saying. Wine represents, the concept of wine represents expansiveness, because wine opens you up. You say, L'chaim, your consciousness expands. Meaning all the emotions, feelings, and stuff that are embedded and hidden and stuck, so to speak, in a person, what does the wine do? It causes an expansion, and therefore you become far more aware, and you experience more. So wine represents experience. Every time things come from the hidden non-experienced state, because it's deeper than experience, and it emerges into the experiential state, that's called Giloy, okay, revelation. And that can bring joy, happiness, because a person is not happy when they're stuck. A person is happy when they're free, when they're open. When there is joy and when there is experience, there is always the possibility of negativity. What's the problem? What's the extra possibility of negativity? Is because when a person has experience of whatever it is, and we're talking about he's talking over here about, obviously, Adam Arishon is in Gan Eden. He's in the Garden of Eden. So his experiences, he's not carrying baggage from generations. He doesn't have a corrupted whatever or stuff there from his childhood that he has to deal with, from abuse that he's taken either when he was a kid or in previous lives. He's a clean slate. He's pure, he's holy, he's a godly soul coming from God directly. So when we're talking about experience, we're talking about a pure, godly, and holy experience. He's going to feel God. But the very idea that he's going to become conscious and aware and intensely aware of that experiencing Hashem, in the experience there is holy and unholy. The possibility, it's still holy, but the possibility of the unholy. Why? He's feeling God. It's experience. He's full of joy. But in the experience, there is also, he is feeling. I am feeling. There is also the consciousness that he is feeling. So the question is, what is he feeling more? Is he feeling more the subject of what he is feeling, which is God, and he lost all track of the fact that he is feeling? Or is he feeling very much, the thing is, look what I am feeling. In other words, how much consciousness of self is there in the experience of what he's feeling? So therefore he's going to differentiate, he's going to say the difference between pleasure and joy. Okay? Pleasure is deeper than joy. When you're experiencing the divine as an experience of pleasure, in pleasure you're totally out of yourself. Completely out of yourself. It's the ecstasy and the bliss of that what you're experiencing. There is no self. In happiness, you're conscious of the fact that you're there, and therefore, I am happy. Am I happy already? Am I not happy already? Happiness is still connected to the person's self, as opposed to the pleasure when you move past yourself completely. So therefore he says, oneg is a state of consciousness where there is no klipa, because there's no self, and there is no klipa. In joy is where you have klipa. We could potentially have klipa, because where there is a self, the self can, wherever there is a blockage on God, because as soon as you're feeling yourself, that I is taking up space, which is really false, because the only reality is Hashem, and Hashem is in everything and in everywhere. But the person having an I is now blocking that. And in joy, you can have an I. And that's the idea. Every time things come to a state of murgash, of feeling, and I feel, that's when you're going into the dangerous zone, as opposed to being in a place beyond the I feel. Let's read it inside the words that he uses. The pleasure and the joy. Inyan echad, there was one idea. Joy, there is more revelation, meaning things are becoming more pronounced. More revelation, meaning it's more revealed in your consciousness, as opposed to you transcending your consciousness. So it's more revealed in you, in the vessel, so to speak. And therefore, v'hu bahar gasha, it comes with a very strong feeling that you're feeling, awareness that you're feeling. Kanal, masha margish ba'atzmusay ma'oid. You are very, very much feeling yourself as you're going through this experience. Minat vekus. What are you feeling? You're conscious of the fact that you're cleaving to somebody. You hear what's going on? You're conscious of the fact that you're cleaving to God. But you're very conscious of that. V'hatainun belakus. And you're conscious of the fact that you are feeling pleasure now of this amazingly godly place. Ooh, that's not healthy already. V'oneg, but pleasure will bilti agar sheklal. In the pleasure, you're lost. You forgot even that you're there. You don't even know that you're there. You're just in it. V'klal, ela b'tachlis habitl. You are at the epitome of non-existence. Kenal, v'hu, and that's called wine that's still in the grape. Wine that's squeezed out of the grape means that it's coming out. It's going into a cup. In other words, you're taking this great, vast experience of God, of Hashem, and you're feeling it in your cup. So you feel the parameters of yourself, of your own existence. Okay? So pchenas yayina, well, but when it's the wine is inside the grape, means it's a deeper, the experience is higher up in your soul. When it's higher up in your soul, it's not so much in the, it's hard to explain this. You're not in yourself. You're outside of yourself, as opposed to feeling, right? So then, it's yayin hameshuma b'navav. It's the wine that's still inside the grape. Sha'or mechusa. The light is still covered. V'nela madayin. It's still in its source. V'tachlis ahelem shaloi. And in the epitome of concealment, hu b'chinas hakeser elyon. That's the level of crown. As opposed to chachma, where you're already, it's entering into vessels, into containers. Shenikra ayin. Keser is still called nothingness. V'achachma me'ayin timatzeh. Chachma comes from this nothingness. Upinish timatzeh, when we say chachma is coming from nothing, b'chinas yesh ki yedua. The flash of chachma, even though it's such a subtle eye, it has a little eye in it. The keser is still a level beyond the eye. V'hu b'chinas habrecha. And that's the difference. There is the river, which in our case we would say is the keser, the crown. And then there is the reservoir. The reservoir is the chachma. Because it's already something separated from the source. As we mentioned earlier, there is source, spring, and chafira, and a pit, a cistern, where you're holding it. Right? So in the keser, it's still ayin, it's still pure nothingness. Then you have the brecha. V'hayayin hanigla b'kois, and the wine that's coming revealed into the cup. Hu yayin shenischat min ha'navim. It's already come out of the grapes. Sheyatza or kvar b'his galus. The light has already fully emerged into revelation. Bekeli in a cup, keniskaliel, v'hu kaishal bracha. That's the cup of blessings. So you have it already in a vessel. Now we're going to see like this. God wants to fill, the whole purpose of creation is that God wants to fill us with his light down here. In other words, the intention is that everything should come to full manifestation in full expression. The problem is, whenever you're bringing things into full expression and into full experience, there is the danger always of who is lurking in the corners. Who is there that can grab it only in its revealed state and won't be able to touch it in the concealed state. But so again, we can't say because we want to protect it, let's leave it concealed. Because that God didn't have to create anything if he wanted that. He could have just stayed himself and not create anything. God wanted to. God is super ambitious. He wants to be able to express everything in a world of where there's a possibility, okay, through whatever it is, where there's a possibility for corruption and klipa and all of that, with all that danger and all that, he wants us to work it out. It's very challenging. So there is an intention to bring. God did not create wine that it should stay in the grapes. Ultimately, he wants the wine to get squeezed out and get into the cup. And that's what Chava knew. Adam and Eve, she knew that. That's why she squeezed the grape. Now, she brought things to revelation, but she wasn't ready yet. The moment she did that, boom, because the moment she brought herself into self-consciousness, into this experience in which she had self-consciousness, then the thought is already, I am, and then that I is not in complete submission to God's I. Ooh, so here's where already there's other stuff happening. And that's where Klippa is starting. So that was very dangerous. But ultimately, through Torah and mitzvahs, we get rid of all this Klippa and all this garbage. So our vessels become clean and pure. We could bring it down into complete revelation and not be afraid of it being contaminated. Okay? Now, when Mashiach comes, there's going to be an elevation above in the future. So what's going to happen is like this. When Mashiach comes, what is now considered brecha means this source. When Mashiach comes, the cup is going to be filled with the wine that's still inside the grape. What does that mean? What does that mean? That what is experienced in our vessels, which is the cup, is going to be that subtle wine that's still inside the grape. And that's considered in the cup. What does that mean? What does that mean? It means in general, all of existence is going to be elevated. All worlds are going to be elevated to a higher state. Everything is going to be in a higher state. So, you have three levels, we said before. You have the river, you have the pool, and then you have the individual pipes and the individual, barrels, so to speak. When Mashiach comes, the barrel becomes the reservoir. The reservoir is a higher place, and a higher river is revealed. So, which means that the level that was considered before outside of the vessel now is inside the vessel. What does that mean? That what was considered before non-self-awareness is now already considered too much self-awareness. You realize self-awareness has many, many, many levels. A person can feel, I've gotten past myself, and he doesn't realize that there's still walls and there's still barriers, and that when he breaks out of that, he realizes, that I was so stuck in which I thought is a world of liberation, where I've gotten out of the constrictions of a self-consciousness. I'm really in that, because there's so many layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of that. So what might have been considered a state of perfect nullification and union with Source is suddenly looked at after Mashiach comes and says, that is so coarse. That's where you're holding. Which, before Mashiach comes, that's like the biggest tzaddik. who is holding in that level. But now, in these deeper, higher levels, that's too much self. It's creating static. In this level, it's creating static. In lower levels, it's pure ecstasy. But in higher levels, this is too dense. And you have to shed another layer of consciousness, and another layer of consciousness. So, therefore, as he's saying, the cup is now what was once the brecha. So what was considered clean and uncontaminable water, then, now if that's inside the cup, that means the levels that are beyond that are considered like Eitz HaChaim, tree of life. See what I'm saying? So that's kind of what he's saying over here. Let's read it. Inyan, the Masha Achshav, Vina Achashliya Alila Asid, after there's going to be an elevation in the future. So the brecha that's now is then going to be the cup, Keniskaliyah. Ha'inyanhu, the idea means, the Masha Achshav hu ha'oineg mebilti argasha klal. That which is considered now pure pleasure, where you're not feeling yourself at all, yanechshav la'asid, in that super sensitive world, and the consciousness that we're going to be, and the spirituality that we're going to be able to access, then it's going to be considered too dense. B'pchenas murgash. That's going to be considered like really, really self-awareness. Ki alo yeh aliyas hamadregas, because we will go up into higher levels. B'chala olamos, in all the world. Ad damasha nikra achshav keser. What is now called keter, keser meaning crown. Tahainu b'chenas ayin, it's called pure nothingness. Then yikra az b'shem malchus. The keser, what used to be the crown, is then going to be the lowest level. That's going to be malchus. That's going to be already considered expression in containers and in vessels. The keser that's going to be is going to be way above that. Way above that. Shehu b'chenas is galus v'yesh. What's malchus? Malchus is revelation, expression, into something. Kiyidu, as it is known, in kem gam masha achshav nikra bilti murgash. What is now considered no consciousness, no awareness of self, no self-awareness rather, which is the wine that's in the grape. When Mashiach comes, that wine leaves the grape. But that doesn't mean there's no more wine in the grape. That means that now there is a higher grape and a higher wine that's in that. That's why we're saying that wine is now in the cup. And the wine that's not sensed, which is the pleasure that we spoke before, that's higher than joy, higher than happiness. The pleasure that we spoke about before, that is transcendent pleasure without any self-awareness, is going to be on a higher level. What is now the pool, that's going to be considered the cup. In other words, what does it mean? The Masha Achshav Nikra Simcha, what is now called a joy, B'pchenas Habitel, in a nullified state, Inyan Simchu Tzadikim B'Hashem, which we say is what we say. Righteous people rejoice in God. So they're rejoicing about God, not about self. The Yismachu B'cha, we rejoice in you. La'asid, when Mashiach comes, Einay Ela Simcha, that's considered Simcha B'Hargasha, that's considered a joy with too much consciousness. V'day l'mev. V'zeu Inyan HaMaimer Hanal. That's what. So we can understand, put it this way, that what you might think is a very beautiful prayer, and you forgot yourself, you became so lost in your prayer, and you entered into such a beautiful godly place during prayer, we can understand that if the Kohen Gadol, the high priest in the Holy of Holies, felt the way you felt now, it would be considered extremely, extremely lowly, not elevated, even though for you it was your highest moment. Because we understand that when you come to the Holy of Holies, you have to divest yourself a million more levels of self. So that's the general what's going to happen when Mashiach comes as things move. The La'asid Yasad, that's the meaning when we say that Hashem is going to make a Suda L'Tzadikim. V'ya Koishal Bracha, and the cup of wine, Miyayin HaMeshumah Ba'Novav, is going to be from the wine that is in the grapes, Piddish. Sheyib, which the wine that's in the grape is considered the keser, That's what I'm meaning. It's in the grape, but it hasn't yet revealed itself. What did we say is keser? Keser is a state of utter concealment. Hakeser da'achshav anikra yayin ha'meshuma ba'novav kanal la'asid rak b'pchinas koishel bracha. Then it's going to be considered the cup. V'hu b'chinas malchus, and that's malchus. Umemela, so automatically. Yeh b'chinas ha'breicha ba'amru nevarech. So when they're going to pick up that cup, whoever it's going to be, first Avram, then Yitzchak, then Yaakov, and then finally King David, whoever's going to pick up the cup and is going to say nevarech, let us create a higher brecha, a higher pool. Obviously, he's going to create a new pool because whatever the pool went into the cup. So now we need a higher pool from a much higher source. From a much higher source. And since it's going to be in the wine that is meshumar, lo yirtz Avram levarech, Avram won't want to bench because Avram is going to say, "This is clean wine. This is wine." And I don't want to give chas v'shalom a possibility for it to be, because remember, once the self-consciousness, there is place already for corruption, for klipa. Because the whole identity of klipa is a lack of bittul, a lack of nullification. Their very existence is a blockage, a clogging. That's what they're all about. In other words, if they're totally transparent, then they're holiness. So they must exist within the blockage. And therefore, Avram is not going to want to bench. Because Avram is going to say like this. What is he going to say? He's going to say that I finally have these waters, or this wine, the yain hameshumar ba'anava, being that now, as it is in a cup, this used to be considered non-clippable wine. Right? The klippa has no access to it. But in the higher sensitivity world that we're living right now, this too is considered self-consciousness. Because the wine is out of the grape. The secret is out of the closet. The wine is out of the grape. And therefore, since Yishmael came from me, that means my energy feeds into Yishmael, I can't do this. I can't bench. The problem is, it's Mashiach's days already. All demons and all dark forces are going to be really removed from all of existence. So what are we afraid of Yishmael anymore? The minister of Yishmael has already been purified. The Chsiv, as it says, the spirit of impurity I will remove from the land. That means that the entity of evil, that Yishmael was deriving its energy from this ra, from the mixture, which goes back to the original wine that got squeezed out from the grapes, which, as we said before, is called the tree of knowledge of good and bad. As we said earlier, that Chava squeezed out a cluster of grapes. Now, we're going to have already dealt with this already. From the thousands of years of purification, mankind has purified himself. So once Mashiach comes already, we don't have any more of this leftover residue of this garbage. As we said before. So what are we now afraid of Yishmael? What kind of perversion can there be now? But in the wine that is unified with its source, the wine that's still one with the God. We're saying it's like in that first primordial world where every feature is still one with its source. It doesn't have any independent sense at all. It's called the tree of life. Yishmael never received from this place. And in the future it's going to be a cup of blessing, nothing else but blessing. So the minister of Yishmael doesn't have any part in it. And therefore, so then Avram shouldn't be afraid to bench. What is he scared? Because of this. For two reasons. First of all, we're dealing with a level of spirituality that is so close to its source that Klippa can't buzz into it, can't siphon energy of it, because it is so close, it's so nullified to its source, it doesn't leave room. Where does Klippa come to thrive in a person full of ego? The more ego a person has, the more unholiness is able to attach itself to him. He becomes a breeding ground for the impure. Where there is nullification, there is oneness with God, Klippa runs. It cannot come where there is. What they like is, see, what Klippa loves is someone who's in touch and connected to these powerful spiritual forces, but has an ego, because then they, on the one hand, they receive all this powerful energy. On the other hand, they give room for all the Klippa to come and siphon and just take all that and use it for their most cherished entity is a person doing mitzvot, but not connected. Because when you're doing a mitzvah, you're subconsciously connected. But in the person's consciousness, they're full of themselves. So their klipa becomes very comfortable in them. And they drain all that energy into the dark side. And that's why it's very, very dangerous. It's very dangerous to be a Jew. You're much healthier and spiritually and kind of safer. But you can't really do much. A Jew has access to everything, but at the same time, he's an attractive target. Because, there you go. So now what needs to happen over here is, but he's saying, but there's two reasons why we shouldn't be afraid. First of all, this is a level of consciousness, this wine. When Avram is going to drink from this wine, it means entering into a consciousness where you're so nullified to the source. And therefore, Klippa can't come there. Secondly, the Klippa themselves have already been eradicated in the world. So there's nowhere for them to come to, and there's no one to come. He says, since in his history, Avram has this paranoia, because he had already Yishmael inside of him, in Avram's channel from the right side, Chesed, Chachma, Chesed, Netzach, because Avram's channel is wisdom, kindness, and Netzach. And which as it is today, is under the influence of Eitz Hadas, tree of knowledge. Tov and Ra, good and bad, Canaan. Shavram, which we know that Avram, mitzad moisrei hachasadim shaloi, because of the extra chesed, the excessive kindness, not that well balanced with gevura, and it just being kindness, is able to get out of hand. It's when kindness becomes too when kindness goes unchecked, and it becomes like unfiltered love, where love just becomes that's right, and it becomes weak. What happens? Yatzim menu Yishmael. So then Yishmael emerges. Stated elsewhere. Okay, so therefore, Hagam Shaloy HaYashayrish Yinika Yishmael. Even though there is no root for Yishmael, there's nowhere where Yishmael can come and stick its tube in to drain the flow. But still, even though he doesn't have a shorish in this, he feels this is too intense for him to make the blessing, because he's going to say before, simply it's a paranoia. It's simply a paranoia. There really is nothing to worry about. But because he's had that in his past, he's been a source of drainage. He's going to give the example in a minute. Someone who is going for the first time to the king is afraid. Someone let's say if someone is not used to at all speaking or meeting important dignitaries, and the company wants him to go ahead and meet these important people because the company needs to get funding or they need to go. So this guy is supposed to meet the CEO of this whatever, Fortune 500 company. The guy's a billionaire. So a person who knows that he's messed up already in many meetings with the little guys, he put his foot in his mouth, he's really messed up in the past, he's terrified to go in there because he had already a mess up with a lesser thing. So he just doesn't want, he's scared to go into it, he doesn't trust himself. Avram doesn't trust himself because on the tree of life energy flow, there was a mess up in his energy, in his pipeline. He says, so therefore, even though technically this is a higher place in which there's less fear of this thing, he wants to stay away. Because this wine and not only are you drinking this wine in the cup, but you're going to invite. See, they're not afraid to drink from the cup. They're afraid to make the invitation. Because we said invitation means you're drawing forth a pool from an even higher source. And since this cup is a keli, and ultimately you're going to bring from that new brecha into the cup. And once things come into the cup, we said before, there's always the question, since it's coming into such an expressed, calable vessel state, there is the possibilities always of who else is going to come drink over here. Even though it's from wine that is now considered uncontaminable, when Mashiach comes, this too is considered already too much self-awareness, which since Avram's channel had Yishmael coming from it, now you can say, Avram, Yishmael got the whole world of Yishmael and all of its horrors that it brought. Take a look today of all the horror of Yishmael. This contamination and this empowerment only came from the wine that we have today, which, as we said earlier, is wine that has already come out of the grape. It's not the hidden wine. And therefore, the wine that's going to be then might not be, as we spoke earlier, that susceptible to this thing. Even in protected wine, in accordance to the levels that are expected in those levels. In other words, when there's a higher degree of sensitivity required, that wine, which again makes you self-conscious, even if it's the most subtlest of self-consciousness, that too is considered a breeding ground, maybe, or a possibility, a remote chance for unholiness to get into it. Allah said, Avram is going to be afraid, to draw down in it, to take from that place, even though it's going to be in a higher place. Since he was one time hacked, his soul was hacked one time. It's like if I tell someone, I call someone, there are people here that, let's say, a person who gives me, sometimes in the center, the people who give, they leave their credit card on file, and they'll do a monthly donation. So you charge it. If I call the guy and I say, I just want to let you know that your card, that my computer was hacked, and they stole all my credit card information. So your information was also stolen. So you better check your thing, close the credit card. And in the same conversation, can I ask him, can you give me a new card? So one of these guys, I give me a new card, you crazy or something? I'll send you head checks. I'm not going to give you no card. You were hacked, right? So that's what Avram is saying. I was hacked. My flow was hacked. Now I'm asking for now I'm asking you to give me access to the Federal Reserve. Imagine. I mean, this stuff is like really potent stuff. The higher you go, the more intense it is, the more deep it is. And you don't want to give access to the klipa. Yes, it's true, it's harder to hack in a much higher place, but even the tiniest possibility of that happening is too dangerous. Since his channel was once already a possibility for the even though in the future it's going to be elevated to a higher place. This elevation, in our world today, this is considered, the level of this wine is going to be considered so lofty and impenetrable by unholiness. But as we enter into higher states of consciousness and higher states of where all of existence is elevated, we have to care about even the more subtler. We become more sensitive to the minute little things, and they too become targets. He's going to be afraid because there was one time a defect in his vessels. He gives an example. Someone who never went into the king's to have an audience with the king, he'll be afraid maybe he's going to speak in an unbefitting manner. If you say to the king, so how are you guys doing? You don't say to the king, guys. Guys, you say to your buddies. You don't refer to the king. You say, how's your majesty feeling? Hey, buddy, how you doing? The guy's used to talking that way. Doesn't know how the proper mannerisms and the proper things. So he might insult the king, not even knowing. And the more subtler a person becomes, you pick on the tiny nuances of what's considered a blemish. This guy's accustomed to speak in front of important ministers, but he might think, my form of language that I speak to a minister might not be the way you address a king. There might be a difference. So the same is with Avram. He says, I've addressed the ministers. I've eaten from the tree of knowledge. I've drawn into my vessels. But the tree of life, that's speaking to the king himself, then I'm afraid. And especially if he messed up with the ministers as well. If he caused that when he spoke to them, that he's for sure going to be petrified to go to the king. Yitzchak as well, they didn't want to bless. Because Esav came out from him. Hakol mitam anal, everything as we said earlier, Bavram. Because in his line there was also Bina Gvura Hoy, Umimenu Nimshach Sar Edoim. He produced the whole Klipa world of Esav. Kiresha the Esav be'itfei the Yitzchak. The Zohar says that the head of Esav is in Yitzchak's lap. What do you think Esav, Rome, and all that, the Roman Empire, and from Isaac. Isaac is Avram's son. But Yishmael Avram's energy is leaking to Yishmael. Yitzchak's energy, which is discipline and Gevura, also finds in the end starts leaking out to the unholy. It becomes the force of Edom. Edom is Rome. It's the father of Rome. And all the corruption of that civilization. And all of that is being energized by Yitzchak. Of course he's holy. He's one of our three patriarchs. He himself is a huge tzaddik. But his son, he has two sons, Yaakov and Esav. And Esav he's taking Yitzchak's gevura and he becomes a murderer. Yitzchak is a very disciplined and very strong person. It's holy a gevura. Esav takes it and corrupts it into murder. He becomes a bloodthirsty. That's right. Yishmael becomes a perversion of unholy kindness and love. So then even in the protected wine of the future, even though it's coming from the tree of life, which is above the tree of knowledge, since his channel was hacked already, in the sense that something bad came out of it, he's going to be afraid to make the blessing, even in a place, even in a place where you don't really have to be afraid because Ra can't even get there, he will still be afraid. You see, like this, if God is offering them to make the blessing, obviously it's not going to create a mess because God is saying, yeah, you should do it. But we can understand why they're going to decline and say, and I think there's someone better for this job. They don't trust themselves, even after Mashiach comes in this, because of the sensitivity of what we're dealing with. Because this is really the whole idea of the whole balance of the world in the future. I hear you, yeah. Especially when you're dealing with the very infinite source from where all this flows into all these dimensions of existence. And you want to make sure that you're keeping the flow, that the flow is coming in a very protected. There's a what do they call it? There is a closed circuit channel. If it's not a closed circuit channel, you don't know who's going to grab that information, and what they're going to do with that information. That's the point. However, Yaakov says, I'm not going to bench that. Jacob doesn't have a problem. Because Yaakov only has 12 holy sons. All his children are tzaddikim. So there's no Esav, there's no, like, Avram has a blemish in his offspring. Yitzchak has a blemish, but Yaakov doesn't. But he says, my problem is I married 2 sisters.
Does that mean 2 sisters? His own sisters?
No, not his sisters. He married 2 women that are sisters, which is a Torah prohibition. You're not allowed to marry a woman and her sister. According to the Torah, a man is allowed to marry more than one wife. But if they're not, one is from different women. But if there 2 of them are sisters, you're not allowed to marry them. And he says, Shasi the Torah la'asrin alai. In the future, the Torah is going to forbid them on me. He doesn't just say they're going to forbid them. It's going to forbid them on me. Even though that in Yaakov, ein shum pachad v'yira, there is no dread and there is no fear hanal. B'Avram the Yitzchak, that there is an Avram the Yitzchak. They produced, they were the source of unholy flow, even though they were big, holy, righteous people. But from them, if you take their energy too much to an extreme, you end up with problems. Yaakov is the perfect harmonized human being, because he's the son of Avram and Yitzchak, and he's able to harmonize their 2 energies together. And when the 2 are harmonized together, then it's protected. Which is the level of Teferes of Zah, which means Ze'er Anpin of the She'enem is Gala Klal v'Klal b'Moisres. It doesn't reveal itself in excessive forces, in the forces of the extra stuff. It remains within the holy. Yanika, it doesn't give any life force. L'shum tzad, to any side. Mitzadei akavin, from the negative possible flow of the right side or the left side. Yamin Yishmael, where Yishmael is on the right side and Esav is on the left. Elekach nikron, that's why Yaakov's channel is called Bria Chatichon. Bria Chatichon means the center bar. It's the middle pipe, and the middle pipe is the least susceptible to any interference from the outside. Vumidas emes, and that's why it's called truth. Like it says, give truth to Yaakov. Uksiv be Yaakov, and it even says by Yaakov that he redeems Avraham. Avraham needs to be redeemed through Yaakov. But Yaakov Ashapadas Avraham, as the Zohar says, he's considered the most perfect of our patriarchs. For this reason, that he is in the middle path of the Ze'era. There is no possibility of deriving energy to the outside, whatever is called moistus. Moistus means whatever is extra, not shouldn't be there. And Yaakov doesn't really leave room for that. So he should have definitely be the man capable of lifting up the cup and drawing down that whole new flow. Right? Yaakov still doesn't want to bench, for a different reason. Because he married 2 sisters, Shasi the Torah lesser of, that the Torah is going to prohibit it on him. And this seems to be a great wonder. He didn't do a sin. He married them before the Torah was given, and it wasn't prohibited yet. We find many things that was permitted to our forefathers, even though they did keep the Torah. But many things they were lenient on because the Torah wasn't given yet. The Torah wasn't given yet. Inyan, the idea is that it's precisely the marriage of 2 sisters that was what Yaakov was afraid. It's this Inyan because this has a certain resemblance to the same problem Avram has and Yitzchak has, is that he's leaving the possibility he's exposing something and therefore opening up for it to be hacked by marrying 2 sisters. This is what's not going to allow him, what's going to cause him, as we said, self-doubt, Even though he really shouldn't be afraid. What's going to cause him self-doubt if he's the one to do it, if he's the right man for the job. The yayinamishumer of this special wine. Kamay Avram, l'fi sheyatzeh mimenu Yishmael. Because Avram, who Yishmael came out from him. Basically, I'm just going to give a little. I think I'm going to leave this mainly for next week, but I am going to give a little bit of a synopsis about what this is. The idea is that when Yaakov marrying two sisters was a huge accomplishment. It wasn't just a little thing. It was a huge accomplishment. What his accomplishment was he converged the hidden world and the revealed world. Rachel is considered the revealed world. Leah is considered the hidden world. It's like the difference between the world of thought and the world of speech. And they exist on all levels. Speech is what is expressed, and thought is what is still in a hidden place. Generally, the system that is in reality is that the concealed worlds are far larger than the revealed worlds. The more things become revealed, the more limited they become. The more things are in their hidden source, they're much richer and richer and richer and richer and richer and vast and greater and deeper and higher, and so much more energy as you go higher and hidden. So when you're dealing with thought and speech, like we see in ourselves, the experiences of thought are so much richer than what we can put into speech. Speech is very limited. Speech can only contain a little minute of what you're thinking. And when you try to express something in speech, it can get extremely frustrating that you can't communicate it. It's like inside it's in you, but you just can't say it. And that's the way God made it. That speech is a little container and thought is a huge container. And it's supposed to be that way because, as we said earlier, energy, the more exposed it becomes, the more it can be misused. The more inside it is, the more it is protected. It's like if you're having a great idea, a phenomenal idea, that can make you millions of dollars, as long as it's in your thought, no one is going to steal it from you. Unless you wait too long and you play with it too long till someone else figures it out. But generally, no one's going to steal it from you. The moment you start talking about it, before you know it, someone picked up on the idea, and it got out there, and he beat you to it, and you lost the patent, and he got it, and now all your life you're going to sit and you're going to say, I could have been the millionaire. And the guy stole it from you. So that's the thing, that once you expose things on the outside, it's always the ability for it to be stolen, to be misused, to be whatever. Right? So the better is. So that's why Yaakov's unique power, he can marry two sisters, the world of thought and the world of speech. He was able to channel everything from the concealed, hidden worlds of Leah and bring it into the revealed worlds of Rachel. Now, ultimately, as we said earlier in the beginning of the class, God wants everything into the revealed. Because the physical world that we live in is where God wants to ultimately manifest everything. But, so Yaakov did that. Yaakov accomplished that. Once the Torah was given, a filter was put. The Torah is very, very, very delicate. And the Torah is always very concerned about what? About it. Let's put it this way. Why are mitzvot? Why is the Torah so? I mean, if this is all about connecting to God and about connecting to opening up the spiritual flow, which is what all of Torah and mitzvahs is, why is Judaism so caught up in the ritual details of everything? Sometimes we wonder, can't we just get the idea and then everybody's free to do it the way they like it? Why do we have to follow the exact ritual when it comes to a mitzvah? You must do it. And it's so extreme, so detailed, so minute detail. And the answer is because we're dealing with extreme energies. When you're doing a mitzvah, you're tapping into the highest forces of spiritual flow. The highest. Infinitely higher than the universe. Infinitely greater than creation. You're getting to the source itself. The Torah has to give you so many restrictions and so many of how that needs to be done because you need to be doing it safely. Because if not, you can create a much bigger mess than a tikkun and a rectification So there needs to be extreme details and precautions of things needing to be done the right way because of chas v'shalom not. So therefore, just one second, it is for that reason that Torah becomes very, very worried of any kind of possibility that things that should be in a hidden state become revealed. So the Torah gives us the right settings. That's why the Torah doesn't allow us to marry two sisters. Because you're marrying in two sisters, you would be taking everything from the hidden and bringing it into the revealed. That's what the two sisters represent. Because up there in heaven, there are two sisters. One sister is the first vessels, and the second sister, the two Hays, Yud K, Vav K, in the God's names, and the two Hays are the two sisters. And you would be evening them out. And we cannot do that. Now, Yaakov himself, as I mentioned in the class the other day, had no worry in doing that. Because Yaakov was a place where there was no klipa. He was living in a consciousness of total nullification to God. He was beyond the tree of knowledge. So in his world where he is, for example, if we would be living in a world where everybody is, everybody's honest, everybody is kind, everybody is ethical, and everybody is moral. The moment you have the most amazing idea of this amazing money-making thing, you have no problem running around with a what is it called? A bullhorn, or whatever they're called, and telling the whole neighborhood that this is what you're planning to do, and everybody would encourage you, and everybody would say, how can we help, and lucky you. But in a world where we know that's full of cheaters, and full of this, who are now you can't do it. So Yaakov, in his reality where he lived, in his consciousness, in the world that he lived, there's nothing to be afraid of. His two wives, Rachel and Leah, they too were in that spiritual dimension of Atzilot, where there is no klip. So over there you can marry the two sisters and unify everything from the concealed into the revealed. But in the lower realms, over there you got to be careful. So Yaakov is saying, when God is going to offer him to make from this cup, Yaakov is going to say, I was engaging in dangerous stuff. True, he was allowed to do it. There was no problem. But he said, I was engaging in dangerous activity, which, if done by the wrong people, could lead to the same problem that Avram and my father and Avram and Yitzchak. And that is opening up the door for Klippa to grab what they shouldn't grab. Leave me out of this project. I think you can find a better man for this. To do this, to touch this sensitive moment, to access this great hidden wine that's in the grapes, I think I'm not the man for it. That's the general idea, as we're going to see next week. How that which Yaakov did with marrying two sisters, even though for him it wasn't a sin, that kind of something is if mimicked, that's the idea. If someone copies it in a non-perfect world, it's no good. It's really no good. Mm-hmm. Yaakov is the Vav. The Yud pulling down in the Vav. And the Vav connects the two Hays. Who is the person that's the Yud? The upper element, Moshe is the Yud. The upper part of Yaakov is the Yud.